for sure. It worked out, so it was good. Hopefully you can get his neighbors out there too. Like Creators properties, they all can benefit from something like that. Like if they have a western facing.
That's what we need in our cabin. So let me tighten my signal. Are we live? It is 7 o'clock. It is August 10th, 2023. Welcome to the Planning Commission. I see we have a lot of visitors. Welcome. I am the chair of Kaysville Planning Commission. We have a very full agenda tonight. Up first is approval of the minutes from July 13th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Have we all had time to review those? If so, I'd entertain a motion for approval. I was, Will was,
I wasn't here.
Paul
so
was.
I wasn't here, so.
Aaron was.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
And thank you. And we'll just do voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. First up on the agenda is consideration of a rezone application from Phil Holland for 521 West, 350 North, from general commercial to mixed-use zoning district overlay. And this is a continuation from July 13th, 2023 meeting. We looked at this before. There's been a few changes, and I will turn this over to staff.
Okay, thank you. So just real quick to review the project and why we are here. This is a rezone request to go from general commercial to mixed-use zone overlay over 521 West, 350 North. The property is just over 6 acres, and normally when we talk about zoning, especially adding in residential uses, we talk about density. The mixed-use zone does not have prescribed density, but the applicant is at this time proposing 160 units. That is up from 132, and that is based on the request of the Planning Commission at the last meeting to add some height and density to the project. This is just an aerial shot of where the property is located. You can see that's just to the east of the I-15. It's just south of Holmes Creek, and then over where the new Taco Bell and the upcoming Charlie's Car Wash is, and next to the IHC clinic over there off of 350 North. I am just going to go real quickly through some of the slides that we had at our last meeting to just refresh the commissioner's memory of the general plan support for this item, and then if there's anybody new watching online, they can see. So the first thing we tend to look at when considering a rezone request is what our future land use map shows. In this case, the future land use map does show the property to be mixed use. So that's kind of the first pass or test that we look at. One of the next things we do after that is we look at the guiding principles. So our general plan has a number of guiding principles, and we should look to those guiding principles really for every decision that we make with our changes to ordinances or zoning, and ensure that the guiding principles are supporting those changes that we're looking to make. In this case, there are a couple of those guiding principles that do support this zone change request. One is just to enrich our city center and downtown, and the general plan also indicated an area that they termed the city center, and so this area fits into that. Also, one of the guiding principles is to provide a diverse housing option. Apartments really are something in Kaysville that we don't have currently, especially larger scale apartments. So this would be a product that really doesn't exist in Kaysville at this point. There are 3 different chapters in the general plan that showed goals and objectives or implementation measures that support the rezone request. So chapter 1 has a number of goals, again referencing back to the city center, area, housing, and then encouraging diversifying our commercial uses. This project also includes a hotel. The city does not currently have any hotel, nor do we collect any transient room tax. So this would be a great way to diversify our economic base and add in revenues that we currently don't have. And the nice thing also about transient room tax is that it's not a tax on our citizens. It's really being paid by visitors and people coming into our community. So it's a nice way to get revenues without burdening our own residents. The Chapter 3, our Housing and Neighborhood chapter, also contains various goals and objectives that support this zone change. Primarily, they are related back to the moderate income housing plan that the state has required municipalities to adopt into their general plan, and the various menu items from state code that we incorporated in our plan to meet those requirements. So I don't have all of those on this slide, but there are a number of goals and objectives. Those were in the staff report that I put together for July 13th. I did include that staff report in the packet for this meeting as well, because I didn't want to just repeat everything from the July staff report from this one. And then lastly, Chapter 5 in the general plan speaks to economic development and prosperity. And again, having the addition of some office space, the hotel, and that tax revenue that we don't currently have, as well as putting those in our city center areas is what the general plan has outlined. So next, I just want to go over some of the project specific details. Some of this has changed since the July meeting, and that's based on the feedback the Planning Commission gave to the applicant. So the hotel has not changed, neither has the office or the retail space, but the 2 apartment buildings have increased from 3 stories to 4 stories. And previously the unit mix was, it was 132 units, but this is 80 units per building, 8 studio, 48 1-bedroom, and 24 2-bedroom units. The mixed use code also requires that a minimum of the commercial space be provided, and 30% is that benchmark that we have identified in code. Previously it was 42%, but with the addition of that residential, it did drop that percentage down to 36%, but it still does meet the code, and I think that's a realistic ratio of commercial to residential. So this is an updated site plan, and one of the things you'll notice here, the previous plan I think identified this as a larger building. The applicant is wanting to do a 3-story building, so there are some additional parking spots here. This was moved over closer to the cul-de-sac, and then the footprint of both of the apartment buildings was reduced a little bit so that parking could be added, but then also add those additional units and the height. So these were also in the packet from last time and again this time, but this is just an aerial view of the project. Some additional renderings looking at the hotel, the commercial, and what the office may look like. There's also an updated landscape plan that's been provided. I think what's been submitted meets the request that the Planning Commission had last month to reduce some of the turf area that was noted and to provide more trees. I think one of the biggest changes that you'll want to discuss this evening is the parking. So the parking reduction request at this point is at 24%. So our parking code, based on 1727, which is our mixed use code, and then also 1732, which is our street parking code, would require a total of 396 parking stalls. Our code for the mixed use zone identifies a 10% reduction allowance. And this is a 24%. At the last meeting, we were at 13%. The applicant's providing 302 stalls, so that's a reduction, a total of 94, which you get, I mean, it's almost 25%. So I think that's something that the commission will want to talk through. The parking study that was included in last month's packet was also updated, and the new parking study was submitted. The outcome of that study showed that the expertise says that there's still adequate parking with that 302 stalls that they're providing. So I think, again, that'll be something that you'll want to talk about this evening. I did want to just go over real quickly some of the public notice and public comments. So we mailed 40 notices out back in June about the project on, sorry, I have the date wrong there. It was July 13th that we had the public hearing. But we did receive 2 comments that evening. There were concerns about utilities, rental rates, parking, traffic, and desirability of the project in Kaysville. We have also had a handful of emails come through today too. I think the commission has seen those. There's been at least one that has been submitted supporting the project, but those that came through today expressed similar concerns noted in the item above. So traffic, parking, I think were the main concerns with those emails. I did want to just address some of the questions that came up in those public comments. One of which is this project has been reviewed by our power department, by our public works department that looks at water and ability to provide, those utilities. There's no concerns from those 2 departments on utilities. One of the questions that came up today in relationship to traffic was how much impact fees would be paid for this project. So, and hopefully we won't have the Holland Group fall off their chairs over there, but I have put together a spreadsheet that estimates those impact fees. For the roadway impact fees, it would be nearly $400,000. It's like $396,000, I think. Previously, with the 132 units, it was, I think, $374,000. So the city would be able to accommodate some of those traffic concerns with the impact fees that we would receive. Another question that has come up, so Kaysville City does not own the right-of-way on 200 North between Main Street and over through the interchange of the I-15. UDOT is already working on a project right now that will add double left turn lanes in. They'll just restripe. They're not going to change the width of the project or of the interchange at all. They'll just do that by restriping, and so people who ride their bikes through there may not have much of a shoulder after that, but that's a short-term fix that UDOT is putting in place that will, I think, alleviate some of the congestion over there on 200 through the interchange until they do a full interchange reconstruction project. And that is, I think, scheduled, I don't know if it's next year or the following year, but that is supposed to happen within the next couple of years. I believe one of the things that UDOT will do on 200 North is probably put a raised curb median in that wouldn't allow anybody to turn left from 400 West or onto 400 West, and people will just have to go to where they can turn around or go around the block. So we don't have any control over what UDOT does, but we have had conversations with them about the traffic concerns. They will do what they will do, and then what we would do is look at the intersection at 400 West and Main Street to see if that would warrant a traffic signal. And that would just be, what we would do in the future. And if it warrants one, then we would look at putting one in. If it doesn't, then we may look at some other traffic mitigation efforts that might be able to help. So just wanted to address that. 'Cause I think that's been the primary concern from the public. I did include findings in the staff report, updated those from the last staff report to just note that the applicant has addressed the Planning Commission's concerns. So with that, again, I'll go through these real quickly too. We are recommending approval of the development agreement and the project this evening. Mr. Holland and his staff are here to answer any questions you'd have. All of the other items that were brought up by the Planning Commission at the last meeting have been addressed through the development agreement. So we've added language into the development agreement to allow for height flexibility for parapet walls or mechanical equipment. Our code actually already allowed for that, but we just put it in the development agreement. The increased density has been addressed. Architectural details, there was a color board and materials board submitted by the applicant that would be included in the development agreement, and we would look to ensure that what project is submitted meets those requirements. We also have added into the development agreement that a lighting plan be submitted with the project. We made the notations of the signage, the desire to have a monument sign over off of 350 North, and then the parking has also been addressed with the study, and then once more the landscaping. So I can answer questions that you may have, and then again the applicant's here this evening to answer questions for you as well.
Commissioners, questions?
The height, Melinda, does our mixed use have a height limit, or is that just in the general commercial? And then we're modifying that with the development agreement, right?
Yeah, so interesting to note, our general commercial and our light industrial zone has a height limit of 35 feet. However, it lists in the conditional uses that anything above 35 feet can be requested, just has to go through the conditional use permit process.
All right.
So 1730 or 1727, our mixed use zone also has a height limitation of 35 feet for buildings that are not fully commercial buildings. So buildings that are all commercial, whether it's an office, a hotel, if it was multi-story retail, there's a height limitation in that, which I think we put at 50 feet. Mm-hmm. However, there is also a section in the mixed use code that allows the council to adopt any standards outside of those in the code that they feel like are appropriate. Yeah. So okay. I think if the Planning Commission wants to recommend what's been proposed this evening, that's absolutely appropriate, and then it would be the discretion of the city council as to whether or not they wanted to set that standard at a higher height or not.
Okay. And then I guess similar on the parking, we have the parking requirements. Mm-hmm. This is a pretty substantial reduction from what's even allowed to be reduced. But it looks like we have a parking study expert who says it should be fine. Mm-hmm. And we can do that. I mean, we could approve that through the development agreement process. Is that how? Yeah,
exactly. So that through that same section that essentially says, the city council can adopt any other standards through a development agreement that they see fit. So part of the reason why you would have those standards in the code is to just kind of set a benchmark for people who are looking at submitting projects or looking at our zoning, so that they would have some type of understanding of where they need to be at. And so that, minimum 30% commercial space, would 28% work in some instances? It gives the council that flexibility, including with the parking. So it may also be worth noting that the original version of the mixed use zone that was adopted prior to my time here did allow for 20% reduction. I think that's a pretty rich reduction, especially in a municipality that doesn't have any fixed transit service and has pretty poor bus service as well. But I think also, depending on the combination of those uses, it may be something reasonable to look at. So we wanted to just have some numbers in that zoning code to kind of set the foundation for those that were looking at that type of a zoning.
I mean, I got to say, Mr. Chair and other members of the commission, parking is one of those issues. It's just, I think throughout my career, I think I've pretty much seen that most projects overpark.
Correct.
But I've also seen some that have underparked, and those can be a real problem because it forces all those cars out into neighborhoods and so on to find places to park. So where are we at with this one? First of all, there's not a lot of other neighborhoods around, and I don't know that there's a lot of extra space because we don't have a lot of public streets in this project. So there's not a lot of extra space for those cars to go. But the parking study does seem to indicate that they think that it should work. So it's...
But there's like, if you look at it, you need almost 350 to 370 overnight parking because you have both the hotel and the apartments. And if you're looking at the hotels, 114 rooms, if they're filled to capacity, which they will be sometimes, and then you have the residential parking at 256 is what's proposed, or is what's required based on the code. That's 370 stalls. And even if you do the 10% reduction, that's what, 357? So 302 is pretty significantly underparked.
That's pretty lean.
If it was more commercial and retail, so you have that
Yeah,
day
that's true.
parking, and then you have the night parking, I
Right.
mean, that mix would balance itself out, and then you'd have you'd have space, but unless they're gonna park over at the IHC, and
Yeah.
IHC allows that for overnight parking, I don't know where they're gonna park.
I'd almost feel almost like a 320 number.
So, yeah, I mean, I think what the point that Deborah, is it Deborah, right?
Yes.
I think she raises some good points because we are going to have a hotel when it's full. You're probably going to have, over 100 cars.
Well, and that doesn't account for any employee parking.
Right,
Hotel.
exactly.
You only have maybe a few employees, night audit, and maybe a couple other people, but
Yeah,
Hotel usually runs on about 10 to 15 employees.
during the day, yes,
Yeah.
but at night, they only have
Three.
maybe two
Not
or
a lot.
three.
Yeah.
So I'll chime in with my experience with parking. Parking's tough because everybody has an opinion on it. And, again, in my experience, people complain about people parking on the street, whether it's in a neighborhood. I mean, it drives my husband crazy when our neighbors park on the street. Doesn't drive me crazy one bit. The challenge for me with this is not necessarily the number of stalls, but it's the location of those stalls. And I know that they've worked very hard to get this site set up, but what you see all the time is the people are creatures of convenience. And so they want to find the closest parking stall they can. And if that's on the street, they'll park on the street. And so, the question is, if these are the stalls that are left, will people that live in this building really come and park over here and walk all that way? Or will they start lining the streets? Which, it's okay to park on public streets. That's part of what laws allow. The challenge, I think, with this is just there's not a lot of street for anybody to park on.
Right.
And so, and I think a very classic example of this is how many of you have gone over to the Megaplex in Centerville? and you drive in through the roundabout and go into where the theater is, and there's cars lined along the streets. There's also cars lined on the street to the south, and an empty sea of parking where all those office buildings are. Because, and I think actually a lot of times the parking, and I drive past this twice a day, so that's why I'm sharing this, but I think a lot of times the parking, even inside where the apartments are, there's parking available, but it's closer to park on the street. It's more convenient to park on the street and not have to wind your way through a parking lot. And so the concern that I have really would be more so, I mean, I think we need to discuss and conclude is, you know, what's an appropriate number of parking stalls, but the proximity of those parking stalls really does come into play. And when you have streets that you have to plow in the winter, and when you also have parking lots that you have to plow, and we all know, I mean, hopefully we get another winter like last year so we can continue to fill up the Great Salt Lake and Lake Powell. But that's another thing that chews up parking as well, is where all of that snow has to go. So there, I think, are some legitimate concerns with that. And it's hard to counter, you know, a study that's been produced by an expert. But one of the reasons when we revised the mixed use code, one of the reasons I did increase some of those parking requirements also, I think you need to account for guest parking for people that come and visit people in the apartments. We went round and round and round in Murray with parking figures, and engineering wanted more parking and planning wanted less parking, and of course developers want to not pay for any parking, but they have to, it's part of the project. So we really had to work to finesse those numbers, and what I put in the mixed use code, I think were some of those same numbers that we used in Murray. And those are based on ULI numbers. I know the traffic study in here is based off of the ITE, which is also equally reputable as far as parking. You know, and I think Mr. Holland and his group, they're a developer that don't want to underpark a project. There's a lot of damage that's done to your projects when you don't have adequate parking. So, you know, there are a lot of things to consider, and the hard thing about parking is that everyone has an opinion on it, like I said. So, where you land with that, I don't know, but it does, I mean, I think it's also worth noting, and I put this in the staff report, so there is bus service on Main Street, which is really within probably about a quarter of a mile walking distance from this project. There is also the park and ride over on the west side of 200. That's about a half mile away. But I don't see any pedestrians wanting to go walk across 200 to meet somebody to be picked up at the park and ride. You're gonna get in your vehicle and go over there. And so, you know, I don't see the use of vehicles in this particular instance being limited because of commuting, because the proximity or the availability of transit just really isn't practical.
Okay.
I'd like to hear from our applicant.
Well, let's do public hearing,
Yeah.
and then we'll have him come up. So I'd just like to comment, we've received several comments today by email regarding this project. Those will be included in the public comments or in the public hearing for this. We'd like to open up for a public hearing, invite anybody who's here to speak on that.
We didn't have a public hearing scheduled for tonight.
Oh, we didn't?
No.
Oh,
We held it
Last
on
time?
July 13th.
So
yeah.
we're-
So I could have noticed another.
so we're not
hearing.
noticed for that, so I guess we'll just move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll let Mr. Holland come up.
Thank you. It's been good dialogue so far. Phil Holland. One thing I just wanted to touch on really quickly, because we did discuss parking is a very emotional thing. If I drive into a Smith's and I have to park half a block away, I get a little flustered. And I'm like a lot of people. But our downtown area, I mean, if you just take an aerial, which I look at on a consistent basis, we have a lot of parking stalls that are unused regularly. And so you can grossly overpark a city. And we all have an opinion, everybody in here. And so the best way to handle this is get an expert and say, okay, here's my site, here's the uses, what does that look like? And previously, we talked a little bit about the idea of mixed use development. So, does this work? And you guys can't see this, obviously, but no, I think this will help us kind of diagram what we're talking about. The beauty of mixed use zone and why maybe over the course of 20 years we've just started to say, yeah, this is more astute way to develop, to plan our cities, is because you don't have to have season parking. Because those mix of uses, they work together. They're compliant with one another. For example, if I'm working here at 5 o'clock, I've got 7 honeydews, and so I'm going to leave. And the requirement right now is that this office space has to have 36 stalls, depending on who you go off of. If it's Kaysville City or ITE, that depends too. So there is a discrepancy in that science. But every one of these stalls that are being required and occupied here leave. And vice versa. If Trek leaves the office and he lives in this apartment, he comes and occupies that. And as simplified as that is how it's supposed to work. So let's now take a step back and say, okay, what if we had an event where 100%, for some reason these guys are throwing an all-night Christmas party, and there's a Christmas party in this hotel as well, and same thing. What happens of that worst case 100-year parking tragedy event? What? Yeah, one. Yeah. So here's what the traffic study says.
You rent a shuttle.
What?
You rent a shuttle.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You get a party bus and you go to Romney's.
The maximum in that event is 292 stalls. And we are providing 302.
Okay.
It's important to know that. And that is based on ITE. Melinda brought up, she based, and the code is based on other items. But let's call him a scientist. Oh, if he were here, he would love me calling him that. Our traffic engineer, that is his data based on national trends with mixed use. Now, in that case, we would be overparked, even in a 100% event, which in his timeline is about 4 a.m. So that's important to know. So yes, if we just say, you know what, Phil does not have, we should probably add 20, maybe 30 more stalls. Guess what we're doing? We're saying, okay, and by the way, I could do that. Just so everybody's clear, I could do 20 to 25 more stalls. But this is what it would mean. It would mean that we added these actually.
Bump outs.
For the trees.
For the trees. So I could eliminate those. We actually really liked the idea of, we had a whole bank of parking along this right here. But after our planning commission discussion, we said, you know what, it's better to have this just open and have this area accessible for this amenity. And so now this area is open instead of a Honda Civic parked right here. So we could add all these items back in to establish more parking, but what my study shows us is the empirical evidence that, yeah, you don't need more parking than we're providing. But what if everybody in the hotel uses all of these stalls? Whoa, that scared me a little bit. And you know, maybe they do. Maybe it's better convenient to park there. But we've all been to resorts or hotels where they designate, they show you on a map, here's the parking. And we could do that. And I think that's probably appropriate for this kind of a development where you'd say parking's out back, your access door is right here and you can access that. So I think that the parking puzzle is being solved. And if it is a requirement of the Planning Commission and maybe the City Council at a later point, they say you need more parking, yeah, I think we could provide that. But I do actually agree with our engineer that we have sufficient parking. A couple other things we've done since the last Planning Commission meeting, these buildings got condensed, and so there's more area up front here as it comes in for landscape. This whole area got bigger, so these buildings, we squashed them, and I already mentioned this area up here. We've taken out stalls, actually, because we think that that could be a better development. Just some of those things that we've done. And then the other thing is this building right here is going to be about 45 feet tall. This one's a 3-story and probably will be in that 30 to 35 range. And we've talked about the parapet idea that there could be some architectural elements that go into that area. And these will actually be less than this building. And so I think that all of those kind of work together really well, which is part of our dialogue last Planning Commission meeting. So I just wanted to point those items out. We're excited about this. One other thing that we did, which is important to our city, is making sure that, okay, well, if we introduce this kind of and you know, I've lived in Kaysville for 40 years, that doesn't qualify me to develop in this city, but it does give me some insight into 40 years of how we live and operate. And there has been a shift in just the idea of affordability, housing variety, and these are things that a lot of cities in the Wasatch Front have said, yeah, we need more of this, including our own city. This, in my mind, is the perfect location for this. Close to transportation, close to shopping. And we have to also think 10, 20, 30 years in the future. There's going to be better opportunity for these residents to walk to shopping than is currently in that area. And that's what the general plan calls out. We're trying to look ahead. And there will be better transportation hubs. Right now there's not, because we have been a kind of a bedroom community. And I think that I was going to say to you that I also submitted to the city, and I think it's in your packets, an economic study, which is actually, you know, some of it, you know, it will be I think it was a $57 million project when it's built, which till now, that valuation is the highest valuation in the city of Kaysville as far as the development is concerned. And that has implications to the city. We mentioned earlier, my jaw dropped when I heard the traffic impact study. We're used to those, but those dollars go right into the city. And a lot of times our city over the years has not really had those massive fees. But this project, yes, it will impact traffic, because I'm about to pay a $450,000 traffic impact fee. I sit in Planning Commission and City Council meetings on a regular basis. And one thing we typically do is we ask, for a development like this, we ask the city for funds. Help us. We're bringing $5.5 million, which is what my study shows, that goes directly to our city. A lot of people like me, they say, give me some of that back. I am not doing that. This project, and this is more of something that I think I'll go over with the city council, but it's important to know that. Yes, it will impact the city. It will give variety of housing. It will help traffic. It will help plan for traffic. And it creates a better population bubble in downtown area, which helps everybody. Right now I have other properties. We are trying to get users to Kaysville. And up till this point, they've said, yeah, we'll go to Layton. Or, nah, let's go to Farmington. It's just that we don't have that population. And for good reason. We've kind of been who we've been. But I think this helps in a subtle way, and it's just the perfect spot for it. I'll get off my soapbox, but I appreciated our last meeting as well. I mean, that dialogue, I told you in that meeting, it hasn't happened in my 20 years, where it's like, yeah, let's take a step back. Do we need to do more in this area? Do we need to think about different things? I'll close. Any questions for me? Yes.
What's the timeline on this project?
So let's say over the course, I think immediately.
Well, I mean, as far as construction.
Yeah, as soon as, let's just say this or an aspect of this gets approved. I think, let's call it 2 months. I think that was a joke for the staff. I think the idea is immediately. So we would start construction. The hotel is calling me twice a week. Did you meet with the planning commission again? What's the city council saying? So yes, they're ready. They want to be here. We're ready to start. We have retail users already. We're in go mode.
But how long will construction actually take?
That's a great question right now.
You know.
Let me say this. Yeah, I was going to say I could build that building, the proposed office building, in 12 months. I could build these other ones in maybe 14 months.
So they might be being completed about the time UDOT starts their project with the intersection.
Yeah, I do think that would be well timed with, and let me also say, I mean, there's plan review process that has to go, right? So I am sure Mr. Holland hasn't done any architectural details on these buildings until it's approved, right? So they'll have to take a few months to get all of that done. They submit the plan review process for commercial buildings. Usually it takes about 4 to 6 months.
2, I said 2.
Yes. That's mostly because, although Mr. Holland wouldn't have this issue, it's usually we're waiting for their architect to return corrections back to us. But that process can happen fairly quickly. You know, it can be, I mean, I think 2 months would be awfully fast. 4 months could be realistic. So, you know, if this gets, we'd want to get this in front of the city council in September. You'd probably be in line to start construction next spring. And then I would think, yeah, a 12 to 18-month build. So it would be well timed with the improvements that UDOT is going to embark on in a couple of years.
And supposing that the project is approved, at what point is UDOT alerted to that change?
We've already initiated conversations
So they're aware of
with
it.
UDOT about the
Okay.
project, yeah. So, I mean, the good news was that this isn't off of a UDOT facility, it connects into it, but traffic studies that UDOT requires a lot heftier than what was submitted.
So I guess UDOT can plan ahead and not be reactionary on a project like this. They're aware of it. They'll make plans within their time frame, obviously, but that
Yeah.
would be appropriate.
Yep, we would, I mean, we don't like to surprise UDOT, so we try and have those conversations with them early on. So, and I want to say that they're going to start this restriping over here within the next few weeks. And I think actually yeah, okay, now it's coming back to me. So the restriping would, I think it may actually end at the intersection of 400 North, and then next year is when they'll extend those improvements back to Main Street. So they're phasing and kind of conquering the most intense area underneath, you know, I-15 and through that interchange, and then they'll expand the project further east.
Well, they got money to expand I-15. It just depends on how far up they go.
Yeah, and I don't know what the interchange would look like over here, but substantially different, I would think.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment on the emails that came in. I know that there was a lot of concern about the traffic. It is a terrible traffic problem currently. So I guess as long as we know we have funds to address it and UDOT is willing to address that, I think the location, other than our sticky traffic street and intersection, is ideal because it's the perfect spot. It's in that commercial center. That general plan, you know, kind of wants to call out for this. It's not in somebody's neighborhood backyard for a hotel. It's right by the freeway, which is great for those who are jumping on the freeway in that apartment complex. I think it's an ideal spot if we can fix the traffic, which it's already a mess, but sounds like there's lots of initiatives and funds that would be put towards that. As far as parking, I mean, I'm a less is more proponent personally, but I also don't want to see a bad street get worse due to a lot of on-street parking. But I would defer to the expert, and if this is a reputable expert that says we could do it, I would lean towards less, just so we don't have pave over our city and parking. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, you know, oftentimes this is the kind of thing that does push to get other transit options. Sometimes you have to kind of work the opposite way. It's just that then there's just more need and we're more open to those if they'll be used. Sometimes without the need, they're not used, so we don't want to fund them. But just a couple of thoughts.
Any other commissioners have any comments or questions for the applicant?
Personally, I think it's still underparked, just because there's so much of the overnight parking. I think a number like 320 or 325 would be closer to what you would need for that situation. But I also have worked with a lot of traffic engineers over my years, and sometimes some of the numbers that are used from ITE is from areas that have more transit and more some kind of mass transit use that Kaysville doesn't have. And especially if they're restriping that area, it's going to be less desirable to try to walk over to the express bus pickup area, because it's going to be so much traffic much closer to the sidewalks. Anyway, it looks like you could maybe fit in. So those 11 or 12 stalls that are down there, are those counted in the traffic numbers currently?
No.
So have you heard anything about those, that they might be able to be used?
It's a tough one to say. I think by nature, I'm going to have to, like our landscape states, I do not own that land that is shown in that hash mark.
Right.
But I will have to do some sort of an improvement there. And so, yes, we are talking about it, but I didn't count them towards anything just for that very reason.
And I hate to get rid of the landscape islands as well, just because of the whole heat island effect. It's nice to have the trees and the shade so that you're not having that hardscape just radiating heat everywhere. But if you could get those additional stalls and then maybe put a few on the end over there, I think they'd probably be pretty close. But I came up with 322 with 114 for the hotel, and that's just using one stall per one bedroom apartment instead of 1.5. So, though, I mean, might have, a couple in a one bedroom apartment, but you might also just have couples with a baby or a kid in the 2-bedroom apartment where you still only have 2 vehicles. So anyway. Personal opinion. I know when we're doing projects for other municipalities, they never give way on parking, so. But that gives it, it's still less than the 10% reduction. 357 would be 10% reduction. It would be closer to like a 20% reduction at 320, 325.
Any other comments for the applicant?
I would just add, maybe kind of reflecting a little bit what Aaron said with some of the comments that we got by email. Some people saying that the traffic problem is really terrible down there, and so therefore we should not allow for so many apartments. If you didn't do as many apartments but had more commercial space, or if you didn't have any apartments at all, but it all went commercial, I don't think you'd see less traffic.
No, I agree.
And in fact, you might even see more.
Yeah.
So I don't think that really gains you anything to do that. There's no question that something needs to be done down there with regard to the traffic. If you were to say, all right, well, we do want additional housing, apartments, but some of the comments were, but not there. Well, let's say you put them someplace else, like up along Main Street or something like that. Much of that traffic's going to wind up on 200 North anyway, because that's the way to get to I-15. So I don't see that you really gain anything by doing that either, moving it to some other location. So, but I hear what Deborah's saying. I worry a little bit about that too. I understand what you're saying, about what the consultants are saying, and like I say, I've seen a lot of projects that are overparked. But sometimes on these mixed use, you're talking about mixed use that has transit and other walkability. This is kind of a self-contained mixed use and there's really no place else to walk to yet. Plus, we don't have the transit.
Yeah, I have a couple of concerns. One of them is I do think I have a concern about parking. Just as we discussed, I know what your engineer says. I just have a concern that we probably ought to just consider making sure we have the extra in case you need it. I don't want to be overparked, but I don't want you to be underparked. The other concern is just from the emails. I think you've addressed probably everything. Our residents have said, we could put tilt in here, we'd still have semis coming out on the road and blocking traffic the same way. Whatever we put in here is going to increase traffic in the city. I think this economically and for multiple reasons fills a need in the city. It meets the requirements for what we're looking at. It does what we need for the general plan. Other than parking, I think it does what we want. So those are my comments on this with you here. And my biggest concern is, though, I do think we probably need a few extra parking.
Okay, just one comment on it when you do make a motion. I don't think you do this, but I'm saying it out loud anyway. Don't tie me to that IHC land.
Okay.
Yes, I'm gonna try to do that. Yes, they will likely look at it and say, yeah. Because some improvements have to be done there anyway, but I'm not counting any of that. So if you made a motion,
So on that, is that just in between your parcel? Is that just a connector piece that you both share and have to fix?
so I bought everything from them except a half acre.
Okay.
Which is, let me get this pointer here. Their asphalt, their parking lot stops right here. So this is a vacant piece that they may or may not use in the future that could be what they've told me is expansion, could be that. And so when I told them that, you know what, we really need pedestrian access right here that would just go right across, then I'll do those improvements. They said, okay, that makes some sense. And then when I started to get into, and by the way, that's where it started. Oh, well, I mean, they're a big company. Happens all the time.
Also,
But-
the attorneys get involved.
Yeah, but yeah, it's likely that it looks like this. But I
But
can't.
you don't have it now.
I can't say, oh yeah, make them, I'll go get it.
Yeah.
Trek will go get that. He'll negotiate that and be totally fine. The opposite, so last planning commission meeting, we kind of had this thought, let's add more units to kind of, and less parking. So now the dialogue shifted a little bit to,
Now, Paul's not here.
yeah, and that could be part of it. But now we're saying, well, wait a minute, we need a lot more parking. And so part of me is saying, and I don't even want to say this, because now how many times does a developer say, I'd rather cut down unit types than add parking? Because I think what you see in front of you is actually a really good parking plan. And if we just say, let's add some more on there, then it becomes something I'm not excited about. Especially considering, I already know I can add 17 spaces right along here. I don't want to do that. This is natural, massive 50 to 100-year-old trees. I don't want to do that. I think that this is an amenity for this area, and I liked the idea that we got rid of parking and we added some of these other elements.
Okay.
Just making a quick comment.
Yeah.
No, you're good.
To be fair, I think that's kind of what we asked him to come back with.
I think it is too.
Yeah. That's the other solution is reduce units to ease that parking problem. I was a little bit uncomfortable last time. I liked the numbers that we saw there, and then to go up to 160, my personal view was it made me nervous, and part of it was the parking, part of it was just the density. And I don't want to ask for, every iteration of, give me 140, give me 130. I mean, that's just, that's not appropriate, I guess. But I guess I just point out that that's an option. If we have an issue with parking, then one option could be
To reduce.
we decide that there's too many units.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because we did
ask for.
we did talk about adding units, which
Yeah.
you've done.
What if we threw it out, that it's proved if, I don't know. I think the 11 would be justifiable if it happens. Because I think it's kind of that middle of the road where we're at. Because I think he's gone back and done what we asked him to do. But I think also, his parking study says what it says. But if he gets the other 11, I think it parks it where it needs to be. Because burdening the applicant, again, is not what we want to do. We want to get him where he needs to be. I think his solution, I think the solution is what he's already working on with the other landowner.
Could that be part of the agreement, is there's so many stalls by
By the time it's
by the
done.
time you're constructing this, I don't know if if that'd give you time to work things out or not. And if it doesn't work out, then it maybe has to pull from here or there, but
That's
it'd be ideal if you didn't have to chop the trees and chop
That's the thing, yeah.
just because you don't know yet.
Right, and I don't want to be handcuffed to them. So I don't want an approval to say, if you get these 11, then you're good. Then IHC sees it on the camera and they're like, okay, now we've got them.
Yeah. I think
By the way,
I think we leave,
IHC's great, I don't think they do that. but-
I think we leave the 302 and leave it the way it is, but that's just me. Because I think,
I'll pass it.
If IHC is planning potentially expansion over there, I'm guessing the expansion would be some more parking. You think, is there any possibility of getting a cross-access agreement there and then, sharing that parking? So, I mean, IHC is open during the day, not at night.
Yeah, if it was anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same issue with a health provider back in Pennsylvania. They had 1,000 parking lot, and it was a no.
Yeah. So it is, I mean, if that was a private group,
Yeah,
I would have it
yeah.
today. But the reality is their parking lot sits vacant
Most of the time.
most of the time.
Yep.
This one, I'm surprised there's that many cars, but that one sits vacant. By the way, 20 years, this will all be something different.
I agree.
Five years.
Like I said, parking's hard because everyone has strong opinions about it. Very few of us have actual expertise, but that's another story. I mean, I was just thinking, when I lived in Casa Grande, Arizona, I had a 2-bedroom apartment. It was just me, so it was one car. When I was in Grand County, I had a 3-bedroom condo that I rented. It was just me. So you do have those circumstances, right, where you have people that aren't going to have 2 cars.
Yeah.
You have those circumstances where, you may have a married couple in a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 cars. I think you're more likely on the nose with the parking, having 2 for a 2-bedroom, but not always. And like I said, I was the exception. And there are, like my niece and her husband share 1 car. He's in law school. So there are those types of situations but the hard thing, right, is that we can't predict that.
I'd just like to make a comment. I think that I can understand why there's concern. I think that just based on maybe engineering principles, though, that if you do try to build to a maximum situation, you're always, I think, going to be overparked. I think that would be the outcome. And so I think I tend to believe the traffic study, that's probably the right number. So I
You look around sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you look around a city, aerial map of any city, and it's just black. And how often are you going to have a full house in the hotel in Kaysville? I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I would.
Well, and the strip mall over there where Benion's Crafts was is kind of the perfect example of that. It's like a huge sea of parking. And we don't want to have that, right? We want to have an efficient land use.
Well, when you talk about that, I mean, I've lived in this city for a good while now. I have never seen that parking lot even half full, I think. Mm-hmm. It's always been less than that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to, and even things have changed so much in the last 10 years, but 12 years ago, you went out to do your Black Friday shopping and you did have to have oodles of parking, but now a lot of that is just done online and people never even leave their homes. So there has been a changing nature of that, and I know there are trends in a lot of other usually bigger cities, but they're doing away with parking requirements and just letting the developers determine what market would demand for those projects. And that's, again, you know, in fact, Councilmember Hunt just asked me about a project that down in the Salt Lake County area, and that particular project that was approved when I was there in Murray, I think they underparked it. And they could, because the code allowed too many reductions. I think that's going to be a very hard thing for the neighborhood over there to deal with over the years. But I think most developers don't want to land themselves in that position where it is grossly underparked. And I don't think they want to overpark either, because that's not an efficient use of land. So
Yeah.
it's tough.
I mean, a stall costs you $140,000 a stall. You figure each of those stalls on his map, $140,000 to build.
Well, for structured parking, I don't think it's quite that much.
I was quoted that in paving today.
Oh, with the pavement, yeah.
Yeah, with the pavement and striping by the time you're done. So you figure your cost and maintenance on that. I mean, that's significant for that amount of parking.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think, you know, we have a project. It's going to bring apartments, housing availability. It's meeting our housing density requirements. You know, it's bringing us some tax revenue we don't have, some secondary effects through economic development, bringing some density. I mean, and I think we'll see some generational shift with the people who are renting there. I mean, the next generation down doesn't want to own; they want to rent, and it's a nice product that I think we can see some people coming in the city who normally wouldn't. And it brings us compliance. Office adds a nice dimension. I think, you know, we've talked about UDOT. I think, you know, with UDOT projects now ending on both sides of the city, the next one's I-15, get ready for it. But I know that the interchange there at 200 North is going to be addressed, and get ready for a new type of interchange. And the facility there that runs down there will be addressed also on 200 North. I mean, I think there's some bigger changes coming to address the stuff. So but at the end of the day, I think developers investing capital in our city, and I think just like we said, they're not going to. They've done their due diligence on this. I think we have to make a decision to, you know, and go one way or the other, and make a motion to approve or not. And I think, you know, I kind of made up where I'm at. I just see if we can get it through.
Are there any other slides that you would want to look at again, or any other information you would want to discuss?
Are you asking me? I couldn't tell if you're asking me or
yeah,
somebody
I'm
else.
asking the commission, but
Any other questions for the applicant or any other discussion?
Maybe just another little item on the hotel. A healthy hotel, suburban like it is between 50 and 60% occupied. Just something to think about. The study that the group has done kind of puts them in that 60% occupancy range,
Well,
which to them is a slam dunk.
And I think, I'll speak kindly of our sister city next to us to the north, but if you go look at the product to the north of us, it's dilapidated. I think having a newer hotel here, particularly where you have now a new temple coming in, is going to bring in business, because people are going to be coming in for events for that. And we're going to see stuff coming in for that. It's a great time to have that, because now all of a sudden you have There's some other things coming on with what's going on in Farmington. I think it's a great time to have a new, fresh product in the community, and you'll see some things coming in that we haven't before. I mean, Afton, Wyoming, who knew that the number one Marriott in Wyoming was in Afton? I mean, and it's because of that presence of some of the facilities there that have been built in the last few years. So I think, you know, there's some secondary effects from our neighbors in the north, but also their hotels. If you go look on that area up around Antelope Drive, they're in poor condition. And I think having a newer product on the market really will help, particularly help us as a city.
Yeah, I agree. These are things that the parking engineer is looking at as well. He's not looking at 100% building, although he did. He's looking at what's the national suburban hotel. So you're going to make your motion, but for sure, I think we have the parking. And I think our study shows that. And anything that we add on top of that is just, I think it's just arbitrary. But yes, I'm going to pursue those other things regardless of what happens as far as additional parking with neighbors. But just chiming that in.
Not to diminish what we're doing, but we're going to be making a recommendation. It'll be the council who will ultimately decide what this is going to be.
True.
So, and just with that 60% reduction, if you have 100% capacity in the apartments, you're still at about $325 for parking. So,
Do you have
but do you have
traffic study in front of you?
I don't.
So, yeah, he did go into that, and I think 100%, the number I keep using is the 298 or whatever it is. Yeah, and it's a time thing too. So he's considering what time of day, which it's 4 a.m. That's the max capacity, because everybody is home in bed sleeping and they're not going to work yet.
And everybody's in the hotel.
Yeah. So he's saying that that number is less than the parking we're showing. So
And nobody's in the offices.
To know that. So that's the beauty of this mixed use idea, is that you don't need parking. And I've seen plenty of architecture where cities are just totally taking streets away, they're taking parking away. I mean, the idea is, and I think it's an important topic, parking, yes. But it's also important, the trend is not just anecdotally, how many different types of vehicles, especially in my neighborhood in Kaysville, are people using nowadays? E-bikes. I mean, when we start thinking about parking lots and we need a lot of parking, I think that's yesterday. I think we're a changing society. We travel different than we used to. And people that live here will probably, maybe they have one car, maybe they have 6 cars. But the idea is that it's close enough to downtown that they're not going to jump in their car and go. My mom, who lives at the top of 200 North, if she wants to go anywhere, she jumps in her car and she drives down 200 North. Hopefully, what we're doing today, 10 years from now, the person that lives on this site is walking, they're getting on their e-bike. There's so much. I mean, if we just look at the automobile, and by the way, the automobile's amazing. It built our country. We're changing direction. And I think that needs to be thought about as well. And I mean, it goes back to, I don't want to add any more parking because I think it diminishes the project. And so if you're going that direction, then let's have a different conversation. Because I do think that we have the parking.
So according to the traffic study, though, the ITE parking generation came up with 339 stalls.
Yeah, and then when he takes into that time consideration.
But that's at full capacity of all of the uses.
Yeah.
But still, it's
But if he takes in the max of time that they're actually using that, I wish I had that study, well, you
Oh,
got
it's
it
right here.
right there. So see he looks at it from a time frame standpoint. The max
Right.
parking stalls for, I think that's the apartment, is 210. If he goes to the hotel, that's how he's getting that number that I keep suggesting, which is
The
the 292.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's this 700, okay, so I think this 710 is the office.
That's the office building.
This 712 is the retail,
It's a small office, yeah,
yeah.
small retail.
And then,
Here's the hotel.
yeah, the hotel. So that first one that we looked at would have been the apartments. And so then this is the table, I think, that combines all of those. So apartments, office, the retail or the small office, and no, I reversed that. Hotel and then the small office.
And we way overparked the hotel in Morgan that we built. I mean, for the first 3 years, they were at 40% capacity. And now they're finally in that 55, 60% capacity. So,
I think a lot of these suburban hotels, and I mean, I was involved in the hotel that's associated with the conference center in Layton. And I mean, if they're completely full, that happens a couple of times a year, and that's about it. That's not to diminish the fact that when that does happen, it gives you a little bit of an issue. What people are going to do, you know, they're scrambling around looking where to park and what to do, but is that worth weighing off against all of that land sitting vacant for so long the rest of the time?
Can you bring up the map that shows the surrounding areas as well?
Yeah.
there's a lot of blacktop around.
Yeah, that one. So what is, not that you know yet, but what do you think is anticipated for in front of along 400 West?
There's
Between.
These two?
Yeah.
Those are
between
being
the
built. So this is Arby's and this is the car wash.
Oh.
That's being built
Okay.
right now.
Yeah, so here's your Les Schwab, your Arby's, this is Taco Bell,
Taco Bell.
Taco
and
Bell.
this is Charlie's Car Wash. So, you know, both of those uses are not going to have parking bleed over into, I don't see those uses bleeding over into
No.
the Holland project.
No.
But you may have another opportunity there
Yeah, to do some,
to maybe do a shared
some
parking agreement
after-hours
with Taco
parking.
Bell, yeah, overnight parking. I mean, I think most fast food places aren't even open till midnight anymore. They just can't staff it, so they're closing at 9 or 10.
Especially in Kaysville.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And even if they are open, it's mostly drive-through.
Yeah.
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 Usually drive through till midnight.
So, you know, and the car wash, they're not gonna be having any one there overnight either. They're just open usually dawn to dusk. So there, you know, there could be some potential shared parking agreement. I would see it maybe more of a possibility with Taco Bell than the car wash.
Mhm.
But
I'll just, in Sandy Springs, Georgia, when I was there for working on projects, when I parked my rental car, the Marriott had a joint agreement with the Staples. So that's where we parked in the evenings, because
Yeah,
the Staples was closed at 6 PM.
yeah.
So everything closed in the city at 6. And so, I mean, it's not unusual to see those kinds of agreements.
well, and candidly, what I see people doing more likely than anything else is just parking at the IHC, even though there wouldn't be a cross
Well,
parking
yeah.
agreement.
Yeah,
Right.
But that's, I mean, right, that's the trouble with trying to find what that sweet spot is. You wouldn't have any ability to have parking at this end of
in
the
the circle,
cul-de-sac.
yeah.
I am not sure where the drive approach is for Charlie's Car Wash. But, you know, there would be a little bit of on-street parking that could be available, but not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably enough for overflow.
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Okay.
mean,
Maybe 12 or 15.
Well, I think the staff, Melinda, has done an excellent job pointing out how this proposed development meets many of the goals of the city. Recognizing also that we're not the final deciders on this. It's going to be the council that ultimately decides, and what we're doing is recommending. I think maybe the thing I would favor is to give them the maximum option. And if they go with that, great. And if they, decide something, but at least they'll have heard that there is at least a faction that thinks that there is some potential for doing things the way that has been proposed and that the staff has basically signed off on. So I would make a motion that we recommend to the council in favor of the proposed rezoning for Phil Holland, the H Group Ventures LLC at 521 West, 350 North, as proposed with the background and with the information provided by staff as the rationale for that recommendation. So that would be my motion.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll start the voting. Deborah?
I'm conflicted, but aye.
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 That's a unanimous. So that goes to City Council with a unanimous recommendation. And we appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Holland.
Bill, we should be able to get that on for the September 7th City Council. So, okay.
So, call the public. Hi, public. Other matters before the commission.
I think we have the names of everybody who wants to attend the APA conference. So we'll get you registered. And then I did want to also mention the Utah League of Cities and Towns is holding their annual conference down in Salt Lake. This will be at the Salt Palace, I think. And they do have the Thursday of that event is the Planners Day. Mm-hmm. So that could be another opportunity if the Ogden Eccles or the training up there, the APA conference doesn't work. I can send out information on that as well. I will say that the league conference registration rates are significantly higher than the APA one. The APA does a really great thing for our citizen planners, and they do a very low registration rate for planning commissioners. But that's also a really great opportunity to attend the league conference. So I'll send information out to the commission about that as well.
That's
and
on
then,
September 7th.
is it coming up?
That Thursday.
Okay.
In Salt Lake.
Are we already in September?
Almost.
School starts
okay.
next Wednesday.
So that would be the night of the
Thursday, actually.
city council meeting that this item would be on the agenda probably. So
Do you think the council will cancel that? A lot of councils do when that's with the league conference. But
they do in the spring when they go down to St. George,
Yeah,
I think.
right.
But
this one they can come back from Salt Lake.
yeah, they're
That makes
committed.
sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. So we did have Commissioner Young that brought up I think kind of a unique training opportunity with the Healthy Utah.
Yeah, Get Healthy Utah. I've been kind of following their agenda a little bit, and I'm not really prepared to share. Maybe I can put together just kind of a little bit of what they're about and how it might cross-sect with us a little bit for another meeting. I'm really intrigued by and interested in just healthier communities, which is part of why I'm here. So I think it would be something that would be interesting to just see if there's a correlation or things that we could learn from it. So I'll investigate.
So just so you're aware, Davis County Health Department actually looks into that, pieces of that. So they actually go that. And so there are determinants of health within the social determinants of health.
Just kind of
and
how
and all
the
that
community
fits.
functions adds
Yeah.
to the health of the community.
ISA, Kahlua,
And then they do have like a designation for certain cities that reach certain criteria. I think it'd be something cool to look into, so I'll try and bring back some more information.
ISA, Kahlua, ISA, what's her name? It used to be Kahlua, Kawa. ISA from the health department in Davis County is the one who heads that up. So when I worked at the county, we worked very closely with the health department on those things. The social determinants of health, but they go to that Health of Utah and actually present.
That'd be great.
So that Wednesday, August 4th, that's a Wednesday. And then, if I'm happy to have the city pay that $25 registration fee. It's not a whole lot, but there is a lot of tie-in to that. My brother-in-law is dating a gal who is studying that at the University of Utah, and more directly tied into our parks and our recreation opportunities and state parks and national parks, and how that creates healthier opportunities for people.
Walkable cities and different, modes of transit, and it relates. It's
Yeah, and part of
things to consider.
Part of the county stuff, and it might be interesting to have the county health department to come talk about this, is access to like how water. I mean, there's all pieces that fit in, but like walking trails, how just having access to a walking trail in your community, and then biking. I mean, they look at all of that. I mean, it's an interesting matrix, and then they've developed GIS heat maps on some of it, and how the health effects in the county. And they've worked very closely with Intermountain Healthcare and some of the healthcare providers here. Before COVID, we were working on a couple of different projects, looking at food in the school districts, and then a couple other projects. So, but they've gotten back to that now. So Isa Perry is the one who was leading that with at the health department. And then housing availability was a big one for them.
So I think that's probably everything that I wanted to cover.
There's also the Utah Land Use Law Conference, which will be October 24th and 25th
Okay, and that's the one they usually do down
in Sandy at the Realtors Building.
Or building, okay.
Yeah, they're on the Tuesday half-day session, they're going to focus on geologic hazards.
Oh,
Ooh.
Because, we had quite the experience with
Yeah, we
geologic hazards this year.
yep.
And so just what is it that, can be done with regard to that? On the main day, on Wednesday, I know one of the things they're going to talk about is the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling with regard to wetlands.
Oh, yeah.
and What that means in some cases, and then there'll be a lot of stuff with regard to housing.
Okay.
The Priest Lake case.
What's that?
It was that case out of Idaho.
Yeah,
It-
Sackett versus EPA.
Priest Lake, yeah.
Yeah.
Wilf, is that information on the Utah Land Use Institute?
The date's
website?
there, but they haven't got a
Okay.
lot of information yet on the conference. I'm just kind of privy to it because I'm helping to plan the conference.
Yes, and that's another good one. That's another good one. So, I've actually presented at that one before.
Maybe we can put those on our little group chat, some of those dates. We
Yep.
can
Yep,
keep track of it.
We'll do that. But yes, I want you all to know I appreciate the work that you do and your dedication to the city. Our last city council meeting was a great outcome, and congratulations to Commissioner Lyon, who literally made democracy a real thing from start to finish with his application for the beekeeping. So that's one of the things that's really cool when you see citizens that want to see change. The farm animal went through as well. Did we have that last time? And then, so last time it was the fireworks that passed, the beekeeping passed, and then it was the changes to the general commercial and central commercial. The city council changed that as well. So I know that was a tough decision for them to make, but you got to start somewhere. So I know that letters of interest for grants for like small area plans, I think, are due at the end of the month. So we'll be working towards submitting one and hopefully get some funding to do a city center small area plan to better define what we'd like to see. So
That'd be great.
yeah,
Woohoo.
I think
We're
that'd
ready
be
for
fantastic.
that.
Do you need help writing that?
Sure. Do you want to write my 3 staff reports I have to do for council tomorrow?
No, but I can come help you write for WFRC.
Okay.
That's not a hard lift.
Yeah, I mean, the letters of interest I don't think usually are too cumbersome. So I'll have to look at what's required, but I do want to make sure that we submit that. And I think, one of the things that the TLC grants, which is the Transportation Land Use Connection, one of the things that they like to do is kind of take the next step with grants, and they funded our general plan. And so this is a next step carrying forward from the, implementation of that general plan. So hopefully we would get a pretty strong look at that, just because they do like to see kind of those, the evolution of,
let's move it forward.
Yeah.
that funding kind of moving forward and being used.
Well, and I think,
Tying back in.
and I think, I've said this several times in front of the commission, or in front of not the commission, in front of the city council. I mean, I think having a small area plan is vital because, it sets your design standards.
Yeah.
It puts your zoning for that area in concrete. And then it also allows you to say really how you want your city to look. A lot of what we hear from the citizens here can be defined in that document. And then they're not guessing.
Yeah, the general plan that we have now is such a step up from what we had before, so
Yes.
much better. And doing small area plans is just kind of the not logical next step.
Yeah, it's interesting, you look back at staff reports that were created before this new general plan, and there just really is not a lot of substance to even tie onto, or
Well, there wasn't a lot of substance to the plan.
no, 12 pages double spaced, and just like the difficulty of as a staff trying to look at that and give a recommendation. Does this support the plan? Does it not? So I think the general plan that we have, it's been put to good use so far. So, and there is a lot of really great information in there, a lot of interesting statistics, and I think even if this project gets approved, we'll still probably end up being 92% single-family homes.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah, I had a conversation about that with a neighbor of mine, and she was concerned about the proposed apartments down here in the Holland development. And she said, well, if we get all these apartments, it's going to really change Kaysville. And I said, we can't change Kaysville that much. We don't have that much land left to develop. It's, regardless of what we do, we can approve a bunch more apartments, but we're still going to be 90+% single-family homes.
The only way you can do that is if you started majorly redeveloping.
Yeah, that's
And,
right.
and then you really are. But I don't think that takes time and capital.
So then the next question was, well, then why should we allow the apartments? And I was like, where do you want your kids to live? Where do you want maybe your elderly parents to live?
Your grandkids.
And when you say that, they're kind of like, oh, yeah. But the kids always want to come back to Kaysville, and they like it the way it was. And my response to that is they can't afford to live in it the way it was.
They can't.
Well, and I was a renter until I was 32, I think. I wasn't real menacing to the communities I lived in. So,
I rented till I was 30.
yeah, it's a part of progression and steps in life. So, And you know, when I lived in Casa Grande, it was very hard to find, like, I was like, I'm way too old to go to a laundromat. I don't want to have any roommates. It was hard to find an apartment complex that had in-unit washer and dryer.
Amenities.
It was hard to find, an apartment complex that the police department said was okay for me to live in because I worked for the city. You know, it was hard. And so this type of housing is needed in Kaysville. We don't have anything like this at all.
Yeah, and anyway, it is, and we've had 3 neighbors who've needed to live in an apartment this last year for various reasons, or flooded house or some other things, and they all ended up either in Clearfield or in Farmington, because that's where they've had to end up. But for a period of 6 months to a year, while houses have been remodeled or fixed, that's where they've ended up.
You know, you want to stay close to where your kids are, or,
For sure.
yeah, there's lots of reasons. So we can philosophize all day, but we probably could go to this next slide, unless there's anything else somebody wants to cover.
Adjournment, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Let's do it.